Well, let's start at the beginning. Have you always been tech curious?
I'm just fundamentally interested in it. We've got everything AI, which I know we're going to get to, right? Massive buzzword, everything's AI, the world's going to change, etc., etc. We've also got a potential shift in generational differences. So if you think about the way that Gen X or Gen Z work, is very different to the way that a millennial works. Very, very shortly we'll be seeing Gen Alphas, right? They're of a generation that we just haven't seen before in a business, and the way that they consume is very different to the way that we consume, right? So that personalisation effect of the way that we work on a day-to-day basis is profoundly changing. Organisations, whether they want to accept it or not, right? The reckoning, the movement of that generational difference is happening as we speak. And that's really being brought about by technology providers, because the way that we work and the way that we live and the way that we, as consumers we buy is fundamentally changing.
Yeah.
Right, if I think about two ends of the spectrum, right, my wife's grandfather, is 90 odd years old now. He uses an iPhone. Fantastic, absolutely fantastic. I think about his generation, right? He fought in World War II. Absolutely incredible that he's using an iPhone, and then my 3-year-old daughter's got an iPad, and she can do probably as much as him.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're talking about an 87-year difference.
Yeah.
Yet they're still using the same technology. Mind-blowing the way, the speed of which we consume stuff, and that's from data point of view. We're bombarded with data. I think the average human... So part of my research I remember reviewing in terms of the way that and the number of decisions that a human has to make these days, because the way that we're pushed information.
Yeah.
I think it's around 30 to 35,000 micro decisions every single day. Right? So you think of that conceptually, the human mind is constantly bombarded with choice. Do I do this? Do I do that? Do I do this? Do I do that? And I think if you then think about some of the learnings from some of the leadership discussions, some of the really thought leaders in the marketplace, right? Simon Sinek, he talks often about the decisions that we make. That nature of we are bombarded with the way that we work and the way that we have to consume data at the moment. The only way we can do that is through technology, right? Because there's no other way that a human mind can appraise all that information. We need something to screen a lot of that on a day-to-day basis, right? To take a lot of that noise away. And that's why I think, that exponential pace of technology, the change element is the biggest problem, right? It's widely documented why transformations fail. Yeah. The speed at which humans change is the problem, not the exponential pace that the technology is moving on. But that is fundamentally, I think, going to change. The newer generations want change, right? If I look at the younger, some of the younger members of my team and some of the younger members of even previous teams, right? And even my children, they want change, constant change. Everything's changed, bored of it, next. If you shift that back a few generations, you had one thing, and that's just the way you worked.
Yeah, correct.
Right? Now, because of that, I do think that gap is going to shut, but we are a long way from it. I think that's really why, for me, that's why I'm personally curious.
It's an innovative era. AI is right here, right now. But for procurement, most teams that we speak to, it's still very manual. They're still very overworked, overwhelmed, stressed. Are we seeing the same operational bottlenecks still? And why is procurement still so bad at buying tech?
Question 2 is actually easier to answer, I think, right? But question 1, I think, the operational nature of procurement is, it's not new to say that, lots of the discussion has been over the last, 3, 4, 5 years around, the procurement shift to becoming more of a strategic function, right? That's not new. I think that's happening. It's been happening for quite a while. I think that's accelerating, especially, post the world is moving at such a fluid pace. Massive economic and supply chain, volatility and blips that have happened over the last 3, 4, 5 years. We've gone from, recession in early 2008, huge massive downturn. We've had, Brexit challenges. We've had supply chain challenges. We've had the Suez Canal challenge. We've had COVID. We've had significant blips that happen on, I think it's a 3.5 to 4 year typical cycle of when those supply chain blips happen. I think what that is actually driven is procurement. Whilst it's been difficult for procurement folk, because to some extent they are on the brunt end of that, right? The expectation is that, you know, we push it to procurement people to fix, but then we don't always. And then I think, you know, procurement folk, and I can say that because I've been in and around it for the last 15 years, is I think at times we don't necessarily feel like we've had the recognition for finding a solution, fixing a problem, taking cost out, you know, driving more top line growth from an innovation point of view, being into the supply chain to fix prices for longer terms, taking hedge positions on stuff where, you know, in raw materials that, it was the procurement professional and the procurement team's idea to take the hedge position that then fundamentally reduced costs, but the business didn't necessarily see it, right? I think all of those things compounded, and back to the vacuum point at the moment, this reckoning that's happening really over the last few years. I think the bottlenecks at times are still happening. I think they are becoming a little bit leaner in terms of the utilisation of technology and the way that we can capture real-time information. We've got push notifications into the supply chain to drive more We've got pull notifications in the supply chain that are driving much more notification-centric data points to people to tell them, what do I do? Yeah, how do I make the change? And I think really then, because of that much more real-time analytics approach that we're seeing in the marketplace, providing you've got the technology deployed, right? We are talking about, relatively mature organisations on top of the spectrum that have got a lot of this technology deployed. They are more at the forefront of it, right? Naturally, because if you've got more investment, you've got more technology, you've got more opportunity to drive the change, you are going to be naturally more lean as a business. Process efficiency, going to be more process efficient. You're going to really understand the technology. You're going to have more utilisation of technology. You're going to have less off-system process, and therefore you're capturing a lot of it earlier. I think the mid-market organisations, 300 million up to 5 billion is really where we see the mid-market at the moment. In some cases, the lower end of that, they are a lot less mature. They've got a lot less technology. They're still working on a lot of paper-based ways of working, very manual processes. And then we've got organisations that are incredibly lean from a procurement point of view, but they've got it completely sewn up from a procurement tech stack point of view, and really pulling much more real-time data and more real-time notification. Those organisations can be incredibly lean and incredibly profitable organisations without the need for many procurement people. Just a few that really help in much more strategic engagements, much less around that demand element, but really into the supply chain. You need procurement as the gatekeeper because there are regulatory requirements that are required. You can't get away from it, right? The regulator will tell you that a human needs to touch this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I talk oftentimes to one of my colleagues in the life sciences business, that talks really intricately about clinical trials and research and development, and you can't really run that process autonomously, right? A human has to be involved. The business may see you as an operational bottleneck, but you're a fundamental bottleneck that reduces the risk to the business in case there's a failure. So I think it's different organisations, different things, different technology deployed, very sparse and different ways of working in different organisations. So I think that should hopefully give you a view on question number one. Question number two: why are organisations, at times intricately bad at buying tech? The way that technology is sold to us is not overly helpful, because at times technology is built for what the technology provider thinks is the business problem, rather than the business problem being what is the reason why the technology has been built in the first place, right? Fall in love with the problem. Because the solution's easy at the end, right? There are many different technology providers that solve many different business problems. In the procurement marketplace, I read something the other day. I think it's around 4,800 to 5,000 different vendors that can be attributed to procurement, to the procurement function at the moment, right? Now, that's wonderful that there's options. The problem is there's too many options, and it's really hard to see the wood for the trees because people don't understand the technical functionality of the software. They don't understand at times, because naturally that's not their job. It's not their job to understand the technical nature of software, the functionality, the use cases, the business processes that are built into the configuration. the way that the integrations are going to work, whether it's back to the ERP stack or whether it's multi ERPs. We've got organisations that for acquisition, you meet technology vendors, you think fantastic, that's going to be transformational for my business. I need that. It's going to fix this problem, that problem, that problem, that problem. None of those problems you had. Right? The way that the human mind subconsciously consumes that information is we buy it. We've got to have it because it's brand new. They didn't have the problem defined at the beginning. What they end up solving is not a problem that they have. You lose the value, you lose the business buy-in, and you lose that sort of that really positive push you had in the business as really driving procurement forward. And we want to be at the forefront as the commercial function in a business. In reality, that was never the problem that needed transforming. And that goes all the way back to a really, really, really simple thing, and that is you have to fall in love with the problem. Fall in love with the problem you currently have. There's a reluctance in organisations to really do that because one, we need to be a bit vulnerable here, right? We need to put a hand up and say these are all the problems we got, right? And some organisations are not, procurement functions and senior leaders are not willing to put themselves out there to say being a bit vulnerable, guys. Yeah, these are, our problems are not really that, right? The problem is actually this, right? The organisations that do that. What they then do, right, at times with 4C or any other external support, really getting under the problem, really getting down to the nitty gritty of the different elements that make up that problem. Then what can happen is your blueprint, when you're going through your blueprinting phase, which you should also do, absolutely before you even think about buying a piece of technology, creating what the vision and the future looks like. And that comes from process design, that comes from really oftentimes a new defined RACI, really understand the technology horizon. How is this going to fit with a wider enterprise ecosystem? How am I going to take my IT folk on? And fundamentally, all of that must be underpinned by a change journey that doesn't start at the point you sign the license agreement with a technology provider. If you start your change journey there, the change will fail. It's too late. The change journey starts 6, 12, in mammoth organisations, 18 months before a piece of technology is chosen. Because then what you have is momentum through your change champions, and by that I mean, your cross-functional change champions, your sponsor, your core team, and this doesn't have to be, smaller organisations. Sometimes when I talk about this type of activity, I think that at times subconsciously people are thinking this is going to cost a fortune. It doesn't. It doesn't cost a fortune. What this means is that whatever you deploy in 6, 12, 18 months' time, we can almost guarantee you it will pass. It will be a fundamental success that can be measured in many different ways. Yeah, it can be measured in value through spend through the system. It can be measured through number of contracts that are in the CLM provision. It can be measured in cost out opportunities. It can be measured in the way that we capture the demand and really stop the demand, from an avoidance point of view. Right? It's absolutely fundamentally putting the business user experience at the heart of everything you're doing, because that's really, in my mind, and a lot of my research around organisational cultural design from a procurement point of view, is how you build a coalition of the willing. Yeah, a coalition of people that help drive the change of what you're doing, even if in some cases it's not beneficial to them personally. They will help drive the change because they've been part of it from day one. And then if you get that, then buying your technology is easy.
Yeah.
Honestly, the buying of the technology at the back end of all of that good stuff becomes very easy because it's really predefined on what you want.
Yeah.
When you don't have any of that is when you buy a name, you buy a logo. Our data shows, right, we've got a really rich data set on this type of stuff, that I think it's about 52.5% of functionality of software deployed is never touched in the business. Yeah? So flip that another way. Over 50% of the functionality that you buy will never be used across your estate by your business user. You've got to make sure that what you're buying, the functionality is going to be used because you need it.
Implementing is one thing, adopting, using, understanding is another thing.
Utilization is something you have to work at, right? It should never, and that's absolutely part of your change journey. We spend a lot of time on the change journey from a traditional change journey, but actually utilization doesn't just happen. Organisations are oftentimes, the business user is fundamentally busy. Yeah, back to the point I said earlier. The human mind is about 30 to 35,000 micro decisions a day. If they have a decision not to use something because they find something easier, at that point they start doing that, you've lost them as a business user, you've lost your utilisation, and you've lost your ROI. So you have to work at it. It's not a silver bullet that you turn it on. Beautiful. We've been through this wonderful transformation program, or depending on how big the project is. Completely deployed it, fully integrated it. We've done everything everyone wanted, turned it on, gone through the hypercare phase, we've gone through an extended hypercare phase, tons of training, road shows, whatever which way you want to deploy it, and then the integrator or the implementation partner walks out of the business. Oftentimes, what we see is that nobody managed it, right? Nobody managed that continuous push for the business user to keep using it.
Yeah.
That continuous improvement piece, that cycle starts again, the hypercare finishes, we move into BAU, right? And then continuous improvement starts. You have touch points with clients when we've done a wonderful job, we think we have, and the client says we have, and we're really, really buoyant. We walk away, in 6 months' time, the ones we carry on meeting the client to make sure it works, everything's fine. The ones that have continued that success into the next iteration are the ones that have had a continuous improvement program to keep taking the business unit on very small iterations of whether it be the technology, the functionality, the new deploy releases. If you think about Roy O'Mara, who's a thought leader and a scholar in technology, he's got what's called O'Mara's law, right? I talked about this quite a bit in my thesis, and I found it fascinating, right? So we overestimate, in technology, as organisations, we overestimate the short-term value of technology deployment, and we underestimate the long-term value, right? Organisations want instant success. They want instant value from their investment. The most value doesn't happen in the first 6 months, especially not in the greenfield phase of going live, right? You get a bit of a splurge and then you get a bit of a dip and then da-da-da-da. It's over a longer period. That entrenchment of that new technology, the functionality, the process, the people, the users, that happens not in 6 months. If you've got a further ahead look, 12 months, we're going to get the value. We understand from day one, we're going to get some short-term value in 6 months. It'll be low-hanging fruit. But most of the value happens in 12, 18, 24 months, into the latter stages of that deployment, not in the very beginning. And that's what's called O'Mara's law.
Can we touch on human centricity, which you talk about quite a bit as well? Is there a misconception around that in procurement regarding humans and AI?
There's a blurred line between what the AI is going to do and what we're all going to do. If you're on the pessimistic side of it, then you can see how, some are slightly worried about if we feed it so much over a period of time, then many roles in the corporate world, you might argue, why do we need it? Why do we need it? I can drive more value from top line growth. I can drive more profitability because I don't have, from a SG&A point of view, I've got less heads. From a traditional ways of working point of view, I don't need humans doing this anymore. Well, yeah, that's great, but what are us humans going to do? So I think when we think about human centricity in a world of AI, right? I'm actually more on the optimistic side, yeah. So I'm more on the much more. We need to try it. We need to be willing to fail, yeah. But at the same time, we have to put the human first. The human will be the differentiator, not the AI. We want to apply artificial intelligence to mundane centric jobs that people fundamentally don't want to do. There may be people doing them, by the way, but don't want to do. That gives us a chance to reskill those people into other activities.
I love your statement on change needs to happen before software or tech is even considered. It's not even in the picture. But let's say now we're considering it. What are the red flags that procurement leaders need to be aware of? How do you think tech vendors should be working better with procurement to justify this investment?
Technology vendors and we've got some wonderful partners, right? And there are many different, technology vendors that provide lots and lots of different, solutions to business problems. I think naturally what they don't do is sell you the importance of the change journey that you need to go on. This is as much a change undertaking as it is a technology undertaking, right? That's not the way that technology is sold, but that's the way it should be sold. It's in the technology vendor's interest oftentimes, I think, to support clients with that and that continuous learning in their platform, because if you only get a one 3-year contract or 3-year license cycle out of it, and the organisation wants you out, very rarely do you then get another opportunity to get back in, right? It's a one hit, yeah? It's obviously, from a sales point of view, it's much easier to sell somebody that you know, that you recognise, that you've already worked with, because they recognise what you do. But to do that, you've got to be a trusted partner. Leadership, red flags, I think, try to always think about the problem. Yeah, what is it we're really trying to solve, right? And it needs to be more granular than, we need to take out £25 million from the cost base, right? Change your ways of working. Mm-hmm. It's much easier in an organisation to change your ways of working, to change your business process, to change your cross-functional process, to change your policy, than it is to customise, certain metadata fields or customise certain workflows just because that's the X company way of working. We often work with clients where they say, we've had X technology provider for many years, everybody hates it. Okay, fine. What reason? What we find is actually oftentimes, in the defence of the technology providers, it's not the technology, right? It's the business ways of working. They will use their 5-10-year-old ways of working, 10-year-old business processes, to then try and force that into the technology, and it doesn't work. And therefore they say the technology doesn't work. No, the technology works, right? It's the world has moved. The business processes haven't been iterated, right? To get to the top end of maturity, it might be less around manual touch points. It might be less around, checking, triple checking, 5 times manually checking, certain documents. You don't need to do that anymore, right? Relinquish control of that. Let the technology tell you. The technology will tell you whether it is compliant or it's not. If it is, let it move on. Mm-hmm. Don't touch it. If it isn't, then you might want to get involved. So I think number one is fall in love with your problem. Yeah. Don't fall in love with the logo. And number two is don't customise unless you are the absolute top end of maturity. It's a regulatory requirement that cannot be changed. Don't customise. Change your ways of working.
What excites you most about the future of procurement and supply chain?
People, and more people. I think, and I don't mean that by inflating your operating model with just an army more of people, but I think the way that both procurement as a competence is now, it's not new, right? Well before my age, right? It's it goes back many years. I think as procurement professionals, the expectation of the business of us is getting more and more, right? Some days we're project managers, some days we're supposed to be risk experts, some days we're contract management experts, we're a legal function, some days we are process excellence experts. We have to play this dual hat, right? And I think that is not getting easier. And I think what we're doing is really building more credibility, globally across every organisation, across every function. And I think because of our cross-functional nature, we touch many different business stakeholders. Probably the only outside of HR from a people point of view, but I think from a stakeholder touch point across the business, I think we probably touch the most, right? I think because of that, the people centricity, the people nature of the way that the world's moving, or the AI way of moving, we have got an opportunity to really ring fence the way that we work going forward, right? And that is being more business partnering, more driving value in the business, away from, just trying to slash the bottom line. It's really trying to drive innovation and growth to the top line. When we work with clients that have got a very strategic function, right? They're the category leaders and whatever type of operating model they've got, down into their tier 1, tier 2 supply chain. They are really entrenched with the supplier, right? They spend a huge amount of time with their supply chain, so they're preempting a lot of these shocks that are coming, right? They're preempting, down to its, probably most typical denominator, which is the cost element. They're preempting some of that cost variance that's coming. Yeah, and they're helping the business take strategic decisions to really mitigate that, lean that out, right? And that can be through, financial instruments like hedging. It can be, fixing out contracts long term, future contracts, whatever it might be. And then also, I think we have got the opportunity to, because of our people-centric way of working, right? We're people at the end of the day, right? We talk to the supply chain, we talk to our business stakeholders, we talk to, at times customers. We talk to our customers, definitely I do from a consultancy point of view, but procurement functions, in maturing organisations, what we see is the procurement folk are in front of the client as well, right? They're helping talk about the supply chain, talking about the innovation that's coming, not just from our product as the business, but also the products that are coming from the supply chain that are helping us bolster our product that will end up going to you, Mr. or Mrs. Client, right? They're really able to articulate that communication flow. Now, no artificial intelligence can do that. Only we can do that, right? So that's why we must keep that, must keep our arms around it. We must keep, supporting other business functions. We must be the eyes and ears of the business into the supply chain. Therefore, I think it's a wonderful time, right? It's a really great time. We've got a voice. I think we should shout it.